Are we good, Alex? Okay. You're good. Smart. Dusted old books. All right, good morning, everybody who is here in our sanctuary. It is always a joy. Every week it feels like there's a couple more pews filled up, which is a delightful thing for all of us to see. Also, greetings to everybody who's doing your spring things at your house and is watching us remotely. Welcome to this welcoming religious community, spiritually led by the Reverend Krista Taves. My name is Claudia Hall. My pronouns are she or they, and I have served here for several years, including as at least once a month the fill-in minister and preacher, and I just adore this place and just everything we stand for as Unitarian Universalists. So I welcome you to our home, a place of comfort, spirit, justice, and hope. Now for our prelude. Thank you so much for that. An important ritual in our Unitarian Universalist faith is the lighting of our chalice. There are so many different reasons and interpretations given to this, but today I think it is a good thing to remember that we need fire in our heart to pursue the causes of freedom. I invite you to join with me in celebrating these reasons and those that you hold in your heart. And for anyone who is not here in person, to light your chalice or candle and keep it close to you at this time as we say our unison words projected on our screen. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Will you join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation? Spirit of freedom that has burned throughout the ages and across time and space and peoples. We gather today to celebrate the many freedoms that we enjoy in this country, but also to mourn the horrific ways that that very freedom is being oppressed and restricted throughout our land. May all who are enslaved, be it to addiction, human trafficking, or through hateful laws, find their way to freedom, and may they know that we are their allies all along the way. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to remain seated and join us in our hymn. It is number 113, or projected on the wall, Where is Our Holy Church? It is our tradition here at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Alton to place each service within the larger sources and principles that we as a denomination have held dear. We are a religion that has no requirement of creed or belief, but we do have things that we support overall. And our service today comes from what are currently our first and second principles, the idea that every human is of infinite value and worth, and the idea that justice, equity, and compassion should be at the center of human relationships and not only for a chosen few. Today, in our service, we are discussing the Holy Week that is happening now, both the Christian holiday of Palm Sunday and the Jewish holiday of Passover, both of which revolve around ideals of freedom. And we ask ourselves, how can we have freedom for all when so many are working against us? I invite the children to stay seated in your pews at this time. We have a video today that talks about the story of Passover. And after the story is over, we will sing you out to your Sunday school. I can always tell the story. So I don't. Can you pause it? There is an old saying in the Talmud that the interpretation of the Jewish faith is the Jewish faith. This is allowing you all to have your own interpretation. There we go. It's okay, Alex. I'll just do it. So the basic story goes like this. A long, long time ago, in a land far, far away, there was a Jewish guy named Joseph. And he was pretty awesome. He got in a lot of trouble with the Egyptians, though. His brothers kind of sold him into slavery because they weren't very fond of him. And he wound up saving the Egyptian Empire. Well, that was awesome. And so a lot of the Jews, because Egypt had food, they wound up moving over there. Well, after a few hundred years, the story goes that a Pharaoh rose who did not know Joseph. In other words, this guy had forgotten the contributions that the Jewish people made to his empire. And so what he did was he said, hey, we've got a whole ethnic group over here that doesn't look like us, doesn't talk like us, doesn't act like us. Let's make them slaves. So he enslaved all of those people, and he made them do all kinds of things, like make bricks. And basically, it was this hard, backbreaking labor that no indolent Egyptian ruler wanted to do, so they wound up doing it themselves. Well, as the story goes, there's a time and a place where they decide that, oh, we're going to give up. We're going to make sure all the baby boys are killed because we don't want to deal with more Jews. There's too many of them. So they try to do this, and a smart Jewish woman who had a baby goes, oh gosh, it's a boy, what am I going to do? So she puts him in a basket, she ships him off down the river with her fingers crossed. Like I said, it's fairy tale. But her fingers crossed, hoping that nothing bad would happen to her baby. So the baby winds up getting picked up by an Egyptian princess, and she decides to raise him as her own. This is a guy that gets named down the road of Moses because he was pulled out of the water. Now this guy Moses lived a great life. He was an Egyptian prince. Everything's pretty fantastic for him, right? He has all the food he wants to eat, people to wave fans on him, people to sponge him down with cold water. Life is good. Until he happens to see a Jewish slave that gets killed by his Egyptian master. He goes, what am I going to do? I can't let this happen. So as the guy is beating him up, he goes over there and takes violence and justice into his own hands. Well, now he realizes, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm going to get kicked out. I'm going to get killed myself. So he runs away. Makes sense for most felons, but it doesn't operate very well for him because he winds up having an encounter with this God guy who goes, you're going to set my people free. Well, the story goes on and all kinds of things happen, but the most important part of the story that I want you all to take away today is the fact that the Jewish people wanted freedom so bad that they were willing to run away from home before their bread could rise. Because, if you've ever made bread at home, it takes hours and hours for the bread to rise up, right, and be ready to put in the oven. Well, they left so quickly that they didn't even have time for their bread to rise. So that's why we eat these flat crackers called matzah for a week, and they taste pretty gross. But we do it because we want to remember what our ancestors have done. So the first thing I want you to remember is that people were so eager to be free that they ran away eating yucky bread rather than have to be slaves for one more day. The second thing I want you to take away from this is the fact that no matter how hard they tried, they kept falling back into old patterns. And it took them a long, long, long time to get to a land of their own and to become their own people. It's very, very easy for us to fall back into bad habits. We have to surround ourselves with people who help us to do better. So when we have those family, those friends, those teachers, hold on to them because they're going to help you in this world. The third thing that you need to know about this story is that we, as Jewish people, are told every year that we're supposed to sit around and pretend that it was us in Egypt, not our great, 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 grandma and grandpa, but it was us who were slaves. And the reason for that is because we have to learn something called empathy. Empathy is when you look at someone else and you try to see the world their way. So when we see poor people or homeless people on the street, when we see kids in our schools that may not have the same clothes or the same shoes or the things that we enjoy, we're supposed to look at them and say, what can I do to make their life better? What are ways that I can empathize, that I can be on their side? So those are the things I want you to take away from the Passover story. One, that freedom is so important that you'll run away and eat yucky food if that's what it takes. Two, that it's easy to fall back into bad habits, and you need teachers and friends and family to help keep you on the right path. And three, that the best thing we can do to help other people is to care about them and to treat them the way we would want to be treated. And that is the story of Passover in very, very brief. And now we'll sing our musical dismissal. As part of our weekly worship service, we take time to express our joys, concerns, or sorrows. This is one more way that we are rebuilding our community, not to what it was before. I love that this is put in the script. Not to what it was before, but to carry what we have become forward into the future that we are envisioning as a congregation. If you would like to recognize a joy, sorrow, or milestone today, I invite you to come forward and place a stone or several stones in the water. For those of you at home, if you have a stone that you want to hold during this time, know that our thoughts and our love go with you. I would invite you to go down this aisle around back up here so that we minimize our back and forthing. And I invite you now to come forward and choose those stones in a moment of meditation. Our next hymn is number 270, O Day of Light and Gladness. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to the beginning of Holy Week. For Christians, today is Palm Sunday, the day when Jesus rode into Jerusalem in a symbolic way that told the people he was here to be the King of the Jews. Obviously, the Roman rulers were not too keen on his idea that this random Jewish teacher wanted to take over, and so this event led directly to his execution for treason and sedition on Good Friday. But why was he even going to Jerusalem in the first place? For that, we need the story of Passover and how it connects to the universal need for freedom. As you heard me retell, Jewish mythology holds that the ancestor Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt by his jealous brothers, but his wit and some divine guidance allowed him to rise to the top of the Egyptian hierarchy. So when a famine hit his family's lands, he was able to bring them to Egypt, which had food. The Bible says that after he died, there rose a Pharaoh that did not remember Joseph. And quickly forgetting the way that the Jews had helped save the kingdom of Egypt from a famine, the Jewish people were enslaved, and for hundreds of years they were trapped until an adopted prince named Moses would lead them away to freedom. Key to this is the idea of forgetting. Rather than be grateful for the way Joseph had saved his kingdom and the people had contributed to the welfare of his reign, the Pharaoh was focused only on himself, and his selfishness and convenient forgetting of the truth allowed him to harm and enslave many people. In order to keep the Jewish people from becoming like Pharaoh and forgetting who helped them throughout the years, every year there is an 8-day holiday where Jews remember. Passover, or Pesach in Hebrew, is probably the most well-attended Jewish holiday because it takes place outside of the synagogue. Sure, some synagogues may have Seder meals or whatever, but for the most part, it's a family tradition and a family meal. So even the most secular, not religious, not synagogue-going Jews tend to go to Seder because if nothing else, it's a time when you get together with your friends and your family. This year, in fact, I'm either going to or leading a Seder on 3 different days of the holiday. So, and then, you have those lovely matzah because you don't have leavened bread for the rest of the holiday. Now, even if, like me, you don't believe that the story is literal, you still get together with others and remember. And the question is why? Psychologically speaking, memory creates reality. Anyone who has ever had to deal with an eyewitness report can tell you how quickly our memories shift and change and adapt things. Whether it is because it is a response to trauma and we're deliberately trying to alter or forget horrible things, or whether it's because we want to be the hero of our own story, and so we kind of subtly change and shift events in such a way that we're the good guys. Memory is something that is not static. It is created and shaped and changed and recreated every time we stretch it. And so being with other people and remembering is supposed to cultivate in you the qualities. You don't want to be Pharaoh, so you get together and remember how awful he was, so that hopefully, if you see those things in yourself, you'll change. Hopefully, you'll see that the way Moses abandoned his people for most of his life is not a good idea, that we should help one another, that we should go and do good things. When we remember, and I love the fact that in Passover it's personal, right? You don't say they were slaves in Egypt, you say we were slaves in Egypt. It's a very personal, in this moment ritual that tells you, we were slaves, so we should know that oppressing other people is shameful. When we know terror and fear as though it was our own, we can be opened up and filled with empathy for people who are going through this now. When we know that we are free and we recline and we enjoy that lovely 4-hour ceremony, we can be filled with gratitude that we are free. I'm super ADD. I do a 10-minute Seder, but that's just me. A lot of people still like the long Seder experience. So the Passover experience was all about being delivered from an oppressive regime into freedom. So therefore, when we go back to the story of Jesus and what he was doing, he knew exactly the political statement that he was making coming into town on Passover. The connection between Jesus and Moses was very, very strong. The connection between Pharaoh and the Roman Empire was very, very strong. See, Rome overall had a pretty lenient policy as far as dictatorial empires go about letting conquered people keep their religion. The reason they did that is they would find ways that your gods were actually really our gods with a different name, and that way you didn't object so much when we took over your religion and your way of life. It's actually been done over and over again throughout history. It's a pretty solid way to get people on your side if you're a dictatorial, oppressive empire. But they were really twitchy about the Jews. Why? Well, the Jews didn't create statues of their gods like normal people did. They just had a room, and they didn't even let people in it. In fact, both the Greek and Roman empires accused the Jews often of being atheists because their God was unseen and had no human characteristics. There are no stories of the Jewish God running around and sleeping with various women and nymphs and other things. There are no stories of the Jewish God, going about and fighting other deities. There's no stories like that. The way the Jewish Bible is written, there are a lot of human qualities and anthropomorphism in the Jewish stories, but not in the way that the Greeks and the Romans had. So they already were weirded out by these people and their no statue God. And Rome was an empire that was probably about 30% abjectly enslaved people. 30% of the Roman Empire were slaves, owned by someone else, legally speaking. That's how Rome was set up. Okay? Another 50 or so percent of Rome was made up from oppressed empires that they had kind of pulled together. So you're talking 60 to 80% of your empire are not elites. They are conquered people. They are people who are oppressed, and they are people who are being told over and over again that they need to stay in their place. So here comes this guy coming in and saying things like, everything belongs to God. And then in the next paragraph, you should only give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. See, that's what people forget when they interpret that verse. You hear that a lot, and people use it a lot in Christianity, unfortunately, even to this day, to say, oh, well, the state has its place and religion has it. It's not what Jesus was saying. Jesus flat out says, everything belongs to God. The earth is the Lord's and all that is within it. He's quoting a psalm. And then in the very next statement, he says, so only give to Caesar what is Caesar's, i.e., nada. So he comes in, and he's running around, and he's preaching love and tolerance, and he's hanging out with slaves, and he's preaching freedom to the captives, and that the oppressed will be uplifted. So what does he do? He comes into Jerusalem in the same way that a king would, draped in a cloak of rich garments, stepping on, strewn flower petals and palm branches, proclaiming the day of the Lord is at hand. That was a political statement. And so what Rome did was they cracked down on this teacher because he was committing treason. They did whatever they could to crush his radical movement that preached freedom to the masses. Well, now we're on the other side of history, and we know that not only did Rome fail to kill this message of Jesus, but they actually wound up subverting the religion created to worship him to save their crumbling empire. And frankly, it is still a problem that Christianity deals with today. There's many, many people in Christianity who want to embrace the teachings of Jesus and the love and the just acceptance and all of the things that he talked about, the freedom from oppression, the uplifting of the harmed, the comforting of those in pain. And then there are those other people who want it to look very much like a Roman Empire, where you have heads and then you have everybody else, many of whom are oppressed or enslaved for who they are. I don't know, as we sit on this far side of history, which would be better. I do know that we can't think things are okay. We can no longer pretend that the past was somehow much better than it was. This selective memory is something that just awes me. I heard someone speaking the other day about how America was so much better when. And I'm thinking to myself, but were we? Well, it kind of depends on who you were and who you are. That's why Judaism says every year that we are slaves. Not my ancestors, not some mythical person way back over there, but me and my family. Because when I understand how fragile freedom is, when I'm reminded that it just takes one person to forget, then I can remember how much I need to fight for the freedoms all deserve. Now, on this day where we celebrate the beginnings of Pesach and the beginnings of Holy Week for Christianity, this speaks to me so much right now because we are seeing wave after wave after wave of hate-filled oppression. All of it hating on people who just want to be who they are. They're not hurting anybody. They're not marching and bashing and kicking down doors and hating on folks. They're not doing anything except be who they are. And the problem is for a little while there, things were pretty good. Rights were expanded, precedents were set, and people became okay. They realized that they could be who they were, and they could go forward because diversity was seen as a good thing. It was seen as a strength in America. But then, as the saying goes, there arose a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph, or Stonewall, or Harvey Milk, or all the contributions made by LGBT people in this country. And so the laws were overthrown, and hate has been allowed to flourish, and our transgender and gender-expansive people are once again shackled by unjust laws that are taking away their freedom to live their lives and be the people they are meant to be. Now, all of us, whether you fit on the trans spectrum or you're an ally, you are called this Passover to remember what it is like to live in a world where it is a crime to be gay or trans, where it is illegal for a woman to have credit in her own name. Thank you, Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory. That wasn't that long ago, folks. We need to remember what it is like to be in a world where Black and brown bodies are treated as other, as undeserving, and as worthless. This is the world that the pharaohs in our government want us to go back to. It is the world that is emerging in Missouri and in other states where this hate-filled ideology is coming up, and it is crushing the most vulnerable. That's the problem, right? The rich white guys' mistresses get abortions anywhere they want because they have money. It's the poor people, the Black and the brown people, the people who don't fit our society's norms of wealth and education that are being crushed. And what breaks my heart the most is that it is so-called Christians who are leading this charge of hate. Let me tell you what Jesus did. Jesus was a guy that hung out with sex workers. Okay? He's constantly hanging out with prostitutes. They're some of his best friends. And it's not like he stops them from doing their job. Okay? That's what people forget. He knows these people and he's okay with them. He is accused of being a drunkard because he's always at the hip parties. He's hanging out with the people who do the things that the good people of the city don't do. He's the guy who goes out with lepers. He's the guy that cares about children. Nobody cared about children back then. Infanticide was legal in a lot of the Roman Empire. So think about that Jesus puts children first and center. So I want to read to you directly from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18. And you will rarely hear me reading from the Gospel in this situation, but this applies today. At this time, the disciples came to Jesus, and they said, "Who among us is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Because you see, his disciples were ready. Once he became the ruler of Israel, they were going to be his right-hand guys. They were going to be the royal court. So they wanted to know, which of us is prime minister and which of us is just a vizier and, help us understand our place here. So what does Jesus do? He called to him a child, and he put him and the child in the midst and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you become as this child, you will never enter the kingdom of my Father. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of God. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, but whoever causes a little one to stumble, it would be better for you to have a millstone put around your neck and be drowned in the depth of the sea." Jesus goes on to say, "See that you never despise one of my little ones. For I tell you that in heaven they are angels." See, in Judaism, there was a belief that every person had an angel that represented you in the heavenly court. And so Jesus says, "For I tell you that in heaven the angels of these children always see the face of my Father. They are up front and up center in the presence of the Most Holy." What do you think? I think if a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, he leaves the other 99 on the mountain and goes in search of the one that went astray. And if he finds it, I say to you, he rejoices. So it is not the will of my Father in heaven that even one of these children should perish. There are two Jesuses in Christianity today. There's one where Jesus is a stern judge full of hate who wants to destroy everyone who doesn't look like a white, straight, cis man in power. And there's the Jesus of the gospel who's living with lepers and sex workers, who drinks with his friends and adores children and repeats over and over and over again, love your neighbor as yourself is the Torah. That is the Jesus that Universalists and Unitarians follow. That is the Jesus that a few denominations still follow, although they get an awful lot of hate for it. The Jesus who said, not only do you have to love your neighbor as yourself, but who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is the person that you and your ancestors have hated for hundreds of years. That is the person you need to love. So I say to all of those so-called Christians with a hate-filled Jesus who are making children suicidal with their anti-gender care laws, Jesus rejects you. He was adamant that helping children was crucial to the mission he was put on this earth to do. I say to all those who want to crush us, whether because we're women or we're different or we're queer or whatever it is, because we're heretics who don't believe in their hate-filled God, whatever it is that makes us different, I say, you may crush us, oppress us, enslave us, and hate us, but we will remember. We will remember how we've been treated, and we will fight for our rights. We will run away to states where we are considered to be people. We will form underground railroads again to help people get the care they need, be it abortion care or gender-affirming hormones. We will help our trans beloveds and neighbors to access scientifically sound medical care, not the hate-filled garbage that you're pushing on us. We will get out the vote to overturn your hatred, and we will fill our lives to the brim with people who love us for who we are. We will have drag shows in our synagogues and in our churches. We will sing the spirituals that our enslaved ancestors used to set the scope so that they too knew their black and their brown and their oppressed bodies deserved freedom. We will never stop until all are free. We will never stop because our religion, this religion in this building, tells us that every person matters, not just the healthy, white, cisgendered, straight, rich, old men, but the black and the brown, the women and the children, the trans and the queer and the disabled, and all the others that they want to impress and enslave. Pharaohs of Congress, of governors' mansions, of state and local assemblies, we see you and we remember. We remember that when you think you are in charge, our faith tells us that the divine mission is not to hate, not to oppress. Our faith tells us that every kingdom built on hate will fall, that all humanity deserves love and care. And we will hold our heads high, and we will proclaim this truth so loud and so long that your hate-filled agenda drowns you like a millstone around the neck of someone, for you have harmed children, and Jesus rejects you. We will build the promised land, one song, one step, one glitter-filled drag queen in the pulpit at a time, until we are all free, until love wins forever and ever. This is what Passover means to us as Unitarian Universalists. Amen and blessed be. I invite you to lift the rafters as we sing our final hymn this morning. It is hymn number 121, We Will Build a Land. As Robin passes around the offering basket, you all know. You know that the only way to get where we're going is we've got to pave the road with our dollars and with our hands, with our voices in song, and with our time that we give to this faith full of love and hope and justice. Please join with me in our offering prayer. May this offering equip us to inspire love and seek justice. And as we come to our announcements, I know that Dee has one, and so does Robin. So come on, Dee.
When John Herndon, who's head of the Social Justice Committee, and I met with Reverend Krista to see what we could do about social justice as a committee, we decided in this time of transition that joining with the Unitarian Universalist Advocacy Network of Illinois would be a good thing to do, because as we move along, by partnering with them, we don't have any dependence on a building. Part of this UUANI is an environmental justice action team, and they're planning a teach-in. What are they going to teach about? The issues that are environmental in Illinois. In other words, we're not going to address something that may be happening in another state. Well, we are addressing some of the things in Missouri because it's an overlap. But we're not going to address something that's happening in Colorado or California or New York. So I'm suggesting if you want to know about where we need to do social justice work relating to the environment, that you attend the teach-in at 7 p.m. Thursday, April 6th. 7 p.m. Thursday, April 6th. Now, I nicely made this lovely sheet of paper. However, I did it after 12 at night, and I grabbed it out of my printer this morning, and while I proofread it on my computer, I did not proofread this piece of paper. So it is lacking the website. So let me tell you what the website is. It is uuani.com. uuani.com. And if you go there, you will, in fact, be able to sign in for the teach-in. So I encourage you to join us. I'm excited about this because we can partner with them without putting any stress on where we move or where we go. So thank you.
I'm going to leave my mask on, folks, because Margaret is recovering from COVID. I'm fine, and she's fine now, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Two things. Number one, it looks like construction should be almost done. I'm going to wander downstairs to look at it. I'm hoping by the end of this week we should be completed there. The second thing is we got notice from the city council that from the Greg Caffey in Alton City Hall that the easement should run through city council on the April 26th meeting. I think that's what the date is. But by the end of April, we should have everything cleared with our permanent easement, getting rid of our handcuffs and enabling us to move forward. So Nancy and I will be back in contact with the people who are interested in potentially buying the building, getting them some information, letting them know where we're at. And if they're not interested, then we have to make some decisions about what the next step would be. Do we approach another person, or do we just put it open on the market, in a broad way? But we will discuss that as a board and make that decision and let you all know. That's the only thing I have. And thank you, hot girl. Woo.
I invite you to join with me now as we recite our prayer to extinguish our chalice. The light of truth and meaning cannot be put out. We are the keepers of this flame until we meet again. It is true, there are many pharaohs rising in this land who do not remember and who do not want to remember the many ways in which the lowly and the downtrodden have built, saved, and continue to save both this country and the world. But we remember. We who are free and have power based on our skin color, our sexual orientation, our gender, whatever it is, we will use it. Let us use our memory to work for the liberation of all people. And those who are bound, use your memory to know that hate does not win in the end. True freedom comes when we remember that love will win in the end as long as we all put our love to work in all the ways we can, in all the places we can, for as long as it takes to find everyone a way to the promised land. Our service begins as this service ends. Go forth and proclaim freedom to all in word, deed, and thoughts. Amen and blessed be. A brief note about the song for the postlude. It's played a lot during Passover. There's a lot of silly songs that you sing to keep the kids awake during this 4-hour meal. But this song in particular not only resonates with the Jewish idea that all things are interconnected, both God and nature and plants and animals and people, but it also fits very well with our seventh principle and the interdependence of all life. you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody.